This is Aesthetically Trained, the podcast. Pushing you to year-on-year progression. With your host, Ross McKinley.
Yep, Ross McKinley, Aesthetically Trained, the podcast. Got a great guest today, all the way over in Newcastle, my good friend Neil. Welcome, how's it going?
Nice to be Irish accent too, so I'll try and been warned to slow it down so it's
people will not be able to understand it, but any women listening who like a Geordie or an Irish accent are going to have a field day with this one. So it's two interesting accents. So I've known Neil for how many years now? I've probably known you 3 or 4 years, and we've always threatened to train with each other. We've not quite done it yet, but we're going to train together when I'm back at Christmas, I think. But for the people listening and watching, Neil, if you want to introduce yourself, what you do, where you're from, and I'll let you.
I'm Neil, obviously, I've just said. I'm originally from Northern Ireland. I lived there for about 5 years before coming to Newcastle for different reasons. One was a female, one was just to break away from things and start afresh again. But then been sort of coaching now for the last 9 years. Recently kind of delved into the online side of things, but basically a majority of my stuff is one-to-one coaching. Also compete as well for the first time this year in the men's physique show. So I'm kind of like a very average amateur novice bodybuilder as well. But that's where my love of it comes from. So I feel like there's a lot of like amalgamation between coaching and then how you work yourself as well.
Yeah, brilliant. The main reason for everyone watching, I'm going to put some photos up of Neil's transformation himself and also what he's done with his clients. I'll put them ping them on the YouTube, and anyone listening, you'll be able to find the links to Neil's information below. What I was most impressed with Neil, he trains hard, although he did once do reps in reserve, which I'm sure we can touch on in this. Coming up. But he trains hard, but also his transformation over the years, both himself and with his clients, has been fantastic, and something that I've found more with my long-term clients, something I'm trying to get them to embrace, is the process behind not just getting in shape once, but getting in shape multiple times. And what it's in the title of the podcast, year-on-year progression, and really teaching people to buy into that, not just settling for where they're at, but also realizing that to do that, to be your best, you have to get a little bit fluffy. You have to go away from your ideal and build to come back. So to kick off, Neil, my first question for you is kind of what and why is your motivation behind that process and your willingness to delve into it, to go both ways in terms of cutting and bulking?
I think like your motivation, definitely mine has changed over the years. The initial reason that I got into sort of bodybuilding or weight training at the start was probably from a place of insecurity. So I was overweight. So actually that made the process of putting weight on obviously harder. I certainly find, not sure about yourself, if you were skinny when you were younger, you want to be bigger. If you were overweight, you want to be shredded. So all my focus was just on trying to be lean or live up to some representation of what I thought was ideal. Yep. But the more with more maturity, the further I went into the process, the more I started to learn about it and actually just enjoy seeing changes and setting long-term goals with things. Because the thing that translates as well to other aspects of your life is going right, rather than having this like short-term gratification. It's more looking at long-term fulfillment for me. Yes. So especially once I done my first couple of diets, literally looked exactly the same time after time. So there was no change, didn't push weight up enough, was still sort of maybe put on half a stone. Oh shit, time to diet, abs are gone, whatever. And I suppose that was a process of like, for me to actually probably get over this body image issue, it's actually just tackling it head on, confront it, and really push myself and motivate myself to get to the next level. Otherwise, we just stay stagnant. And for me, that wasn't a motivating factor in any way.
Brilliant. I think something just was really good there, mate, which you touched on right away, is if people, anyone, when you start a transformation, there's normally a reason behind it. People want abs, or they want to be bigger, or they want to be leaner, or whatever it is. But it's normally linked to a feeling or an emotion, and you tie it to inevitably an outcome goal, and you say, right, when I've got abs, I'll be happy. Or equally, it could be when I've got abs, I'll pull more birds, or whatever it is. Or I'm going to be more confident, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And you might do along the way, but something for everyone is understanding why you want to be a certain way initially. So for some lads, it's right, I was bigger, or I was fat as a kid, or you were overweight. Now I want to be lean. And understanding that maybe it's the emotional attachment that you might have to said goals. And also then what I try to talk about with my clients is, and I'm sure you do the same, is understanding how those wants and desires and influences, if you like, can also affect your goals in terms of you might not want to do it. So, like for you there, I'm probably the opposite. I mentioned it before. I've always been pretty lean-ish when I was younger. Whereas for some lads who've been overweight, doesn't mean that they are now, but they could have been in shape for years, but they might have this thing in their head of, if I put weight on, I'm going to look fluffy. I'm going to look soft or fat or whatever. And understanding that, and I think we talked briefly before, didn't we, and embracing it and really going for it is massive. So how do you do that with your clients, mate? Do you talk it through with them? Do you set sort of, how do you keep them on track along the way is what I'm asking, I guess.
I think the thing is, as a coach, it's like leading by example too. I think that's a big thing. You know, if I can't do it, then how can I expect my client to do it? So I think having that body of work to go, you know, this is, take away genetics or anything out of it. This was me 3 years ago, doing this process that's got me to say this point. Now, that's not to say it's word level, but it's certainly the best version I can be at this time. So I think it's like having to like periodize certain things as well and go, right, for 3 or 4 months, we're going to try this. I'm your coach. We'll be keeping an eye on things as well. It's not about getting fat. We're trying to add muscle. So it's switching the focus away from thinking, right, I'm getting fatter or my abs are going to go, I'm getting bigger. I'm progressively getting stronger in the gym every week. And I think attaching your focus to that mindset of like, I'm going to be a performance athlete. That's certainly the way I view myself now, rather than shit, where's my abs went? They're nothing, and they're not in the mirror anymore. Buying into that, we're going to get progressively stronger. And in the long run, that will lead to a leaner, better physique that every time there's improvement in. So 100% has happened like periodized times. So what I tend to do with clients when they're putting weight on, obviously this is all person dependent, but we'll maybe break it into 2-3 month goals. So that's what we're pushing towards. Maybe we pull back, do a little bit of mini cut and push on again. Or maybe we then go into a dieting phase, but there's always these very specific blocks of we're going from this point to this point, we review, and then we go again, rather than going in 3 years' time, I'm going to be here, and you miss out on all the little things.
Yes, that you bring up a great point there I want to touch on actually, because I know you've done this. So when we are bulking, I haven't done this personally, or I didn't really do it when I was bulking. My heaviest, I got up to 100 kilos. For a natural lad, 100 kilos pretty fucking big. And I like to tell people I'm 6 foot. I might be just a smidge under, but women on the drink believe I'm 6 foot when I'm wearing my trainers, so it's sound. But 100 kilos, right? I was in Australia. I was like a fucking whale. I had a brief outline of abs, right? But that bulk that I done then set us up for, well, I believe actually that bulk back in 2019. I was working with Dusty Hanshaw at the time. I was doing DC training. It was class. But that bulk, I think, has built the muscle and given us the foundation now where I'm still holding a lot of size despite being a lot leaner. But what I didn't do, and this is what I want to touch on there because you mentioned it, I didn't do any mini cuts. So I felt fat. So I did my perception of self at the time, which I know we got on the day, I felt like, I was like, listen, I'm normally a good looking lad, but my cheeks are puffy as fuck. I was like, I remember being in Australia and just thinking, I just don't look like how I normally look. But I didn't. I was doing us wrong. I was big, but I didn't look that far away. But in my head, and this is all of it is bodybuilders, natural bodybuilders, competing bodybuilders, people that just go at the gym want to be better. I always think that later on, you don't actually realize how you look at the time. It's very hard to see yourself until months later, which is why it's so important to take photos. But without going off on too much of a tangent, the thing I want to ask on there, which was really interesting, is the mini cuts. So talk us through, Neil, how you done that yourself and also with your clients, because it's not something I done when I was bulking. And from my own experience, maybe for me, I could have took it a little bit slower and maybe not been so much of a fat cunt, essentially. So go on, you tell us.
That's a tough thing, because you know yourself, like you need to get heavier, you need to see the scales going up to be getting bigger. And it's definitely a hard thing to justify to yourself if you're wanting to stay lean and look good, or what your perception of good is all year round.
Yes.
I found there, so I competed at 170 pound, which was small, it was very lean. I couldn't have got much leaner. Over this last 5 months, I've probably gained close to 50 pound now of body weight.
Wow.
So all in all, it's a lot from where I'm at, but 5'8", 5'9", we'll say then, for going for 6 foot.
We all do.
But within that period then, I wanted to push body weight as high as I could, come out of that dieting phase, rebound essentially, and build as much. There's only so much food, and that's just something I would look at with clients, that you're able to digest before you're feeling very bloated, your appetite drops. So that's more so when I would look to do a mini cut. So it's a couple of variables I'm looking at in terms of, right, how's recovery from training? what's your digestion like, and also, are you actually getting too fluffy, or are you actually just getting fat? Because that's when I would want to pull back and come from a better starting point, not just from a physical standpoint, but also I think psychologically, like you say, you still want to feel good in yourself. You still want to feel like you train. So depending on the person, how hard you push, I'd always potentially look at rate of gain. How much is that person really gaining per week? And that'll change from natural to enhanced as well. That's other factors to take into account. I certainly deal with mostly natural athletes. Myself, I've went to the dark side a little bit, and that has also helped with the gain. So I'm more than happy to talk about, so you can push a little bit harder out of the blocks from there as well. But the mini cuts, I like them to be fairly aggressive, especially. So, for example, my last mini cut there I was at 210 pound. I dropped 15 pound in 2 weeks. Essentially half my calorie intake, but I was on 5,500. So it was still a reasonable amount of food. And up my cardio 5 times a week just to get in and out, a bit like robbing a bank. I didn't want to my goal is to get bigger. This is more just setting up a phase where then I could continue to push. Otherwise, I would have just felt saturated. And that's something I'll do with clients, not to the same level of aggressiveness usually, because their goal isn't to be a bodybuilder. They're trying to still look good, but the end goal is still to build muscle and progress. Yeah,
fantastic. Some fucking brilliant points there, mate. I think the key thing to take home there for anyone that's in a muscle building phase, it's the same with a cut, but Neil mentioned it, and you've heard me say it's the biggest cop-out in personal training history or coaching history. And people ask you a question, you say it depends on the person, but it does actually depend on the person. And I think something for me, and going back to what I mentioned before about my bulk and the difference with some of my clients, I mentioned I didn't use a mini cut. I do mini cuts with my clients. However, knowing about the person and their history, because if the person's been overweight, if they've been historically someone who holds on to a lot of fat, they're probably not like me and happy to be fat or to really push, because I in my head was like, I'm not fat. I've never really been fat. I can just fucking push as hard as I wanted, and I didn't have any psychological hang-ups on the process apart from being a vain cunt and thinking, oh God, I don't look as good. But other than that, I was pretty happy to do it, really, and I could see my strength going up massively using the numbers in the gym, applying progressive overload, having a logbook. So I was tying a lot of my progress, instead of to the mirror, I was tying it to my progression in the gym, to the numbers, a little bit to the scale. And I just wanted to see 100 when I stood on the scale as well. So I was like, right, I want to get to that point. That was like a thing for us.
That's a great point, actually, Ross. But I think sometimes that's actually a limiting factor too. I've been at the point where I'm going to get the 100 kilos, and I find myself like the night before having a free meal. Right. Before I went in, just to see that number in the scales, and then you can kind of get carried away, as you say. It's the progress focus and performance is going to tell you everything. Just chasing a number sometimes is a limiting factor, because you will then probably get fat too. Yeah.
This leads more nicely, mate. Actually, we'll jump in that now because we've kind of touched on it. So, general tips for bulk, and then just in terms of calories, training in general. So, I'll kick off. I think, like I say, trying to have the process tied more to not so much the scale weight, because I think, like Neil's mentioned, that can be a bad thing, but certainly tracking it. But your numbers in the gym. So, learning, and it goes without fucking saying you should have a training program, but beating your numbers each week and seeing that is your affirmation that you're headed in the right direction, as opposed to looking in the mirror and going, oh, I'm shredded or whatever, that you're losing weight. The likelihood is in a bulk that you're probably going away from your best in terms of looks, but you could be heading towards your best in another area in terms of strength in the gym. So my first one would definitely be have a logbook and record, and obviously try and beat those numbers. But from your experience, mate, what would you say? What's worked well for you and your clients?
I mean, definitely that from a training standpoint is the gold standard. I think anyways, me and you are similar off the same hymn sheet when it comes to training. So that chasing progressive overload with intent, with execution is a given. In terms of calories, I think people want to just go on, it's eat everything. It's not, like I call it off season. It's still an on season if you're trying to optimize what you're doing. So still tracking calories, being progressive with the way you would be with training, being progressive with your calorie intake. So it's not going from 2,000 to just the fuck it, I'll eat everything, 5,000 calories. It's progressively, as and when needed, add calories in. Because as I talked about, eventually digestion, appetite bombs out. So we want to take it to that point and eat as much out of each calorie increase as we can before we have to then potentially pull back.
We need to be able to assimilate and utilize and take the nutrients from the foods that we're eating, and that a lot of that comes down to digestion and enjoying your food. Making sure that the meals that you cook, the first part of eating anything, I've mentioned my clients all the time, is salivating, is the fact that when you're enjoying your food, you start that process both mentally and physically to digest it properly. If you're eating shit and you're bored of it, and your body's not going to be able to digest it as well. How would you battle that, mate? Something I suggest to my clients is every 3 to 4 weeks, or maybe it's not as often as that. Maybe it's every 6 to 8 weeks if they get bored with the food. I suggest completely rotating a lot of the protein choices and a lot of their options. So we might switch chicken for turkey or vice versa, and kind of go through the diet and try and make swaps to make it more interesting. Would you do stuff like that to keep pushing the calories, or how would you do it?
Yes. So obviously we want to find, like for myself, like I'm big into digestion. So we're trying to find like an array of foods there that we can digest well, know we can digest well. And I think things like starting off with stuff that is that kind of lower volume sort of food, and then potentially increasing it up. So I know on a diet, I probably don't have people eating a lot of red meats. I tend to keep fat a little bit lower. So maybe instead of like white fish, we're then going to red meat. Maybe instead of like egg whites in a diet, we're then sort of going up towards full eggs, salmon, start introducing foods like that is just higher, more calorically dense foods that we can introduce. Add some dark chocolate to your oats. There's plenty of ways of doing it. Adding full fat milk then as we go up the way, especially as the more calories you'll need to digest as well.
Yeah. One of the things I learned when I was younger, when I worked with Phil Graham, he does a lot of business coaching now for PTs actually, but he was originally a really good bodybuilding coach. And one of my preps when I was between 22, 23, feels like an age ago now, nearly 30, Neil, getting there. But I remember years ago, I was doing that, working with Phil, and we built up my diet, and there was loads of stuff in my diet. And I'm sure my clients and your clients think the same now, where you almost look at the Haribo post-training, or the Snacker Jacks, or the bananas, or whatever it is. Bananas is an obvious one, but these little things you're putting in, or the Rice Krispie squares with your post-training meal, all of these things. But by adding these things in, we're slowly increasing calories. Ideally, it's stuff that you like, so it stops you craving. But what's brilliant about these little additions, and I think this is where maybe coaches think a little bit differently, you're sometimes adding something in purely so you can pull it later. It's literally just an easy way later on when you're cutting to say, right, I know fine well that we can take the Haribo out here, the 2 Snacker Jacks out there, we'll take out that snack here, we're going to drop the bagel with jam that's with your last meal before bed, and all of a sudden it's a really easy way as a coach to just pull out carbs or equally to add them in. So I think everyone, when you are dieting, is try to think outside the box a little bit. Don't necessarily think that it just has to be oats and fucking rice and potato. You can add in a few little different things with the knowledge that then when you come to cut, that's an easy place to pull 25 grams of carbs, or that's an easy place to pull a little bit of fat in terms of peanut butter or oils or whatever it is that you want to use. Is that something you would do as well, Neil?
I think that's a great point. I think that definitely food palatability, that's kind of how you say it, on the way up is crazy important, because as you say, then it's simply like making changes down the way. So when if I'm looking at a whole, say a year of somebody gaining muscle or losing body fat, we're kind of going, right, this is the starting point of this diet, and this evolves through either calories up or calories down. But the meals, the time of the meals might very much stay the same because it works for them. So it might be a matter of, instead of having pasta with your meal, we then, when we're dieting, go to potato, go to nimble bread, go to salad. So there's always working up in this scale, up and downwards. But the food's never really, the actual food volume changes, but the food structure doesn't necessarily change. And like you say, like the Cocoa Pops post-workout, the interest shakes, the carbohydrate shakes, great ways to get calories in, but like you don't miss them when you're dieting back down again because they're not massively filling. No, that's exactly right. I think having that, that in terms of the process and kind of imagining almost having the foresight sometimes of where you might be in 3 months or 6 months, and trying to add foods in that way so that you're enjoying it, but also so you kind of almost, your future self will thank you if you can make the diet a little bit easier to amend later. And the timing as well, mate. So the timing for me, the first thing I teach everyone in the 28-day challenge, I think I go on about all the time, as much as calories in versus calories out is important, the number one thing I try to teach is stimulating MPS, muscle protein synthesis throughout the day, making sure that we're hitting those windows in terms of every 3 to 4 hours, not the anabolic window, just can you stimulate that need in the body to either build muscle mass in a bulk, which is what we're talking about here, or equally, in a cut, can we be trying to signal and trying to retain as much muscle mass as possible? So the timing is really important. I'm glad that we agree on that as well, mate. I think it's very easy. I think sometimes it's like, because you can get the general fitness community that it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's this v that. But actually, I think when you do have a little bit deeper knowledge, you delve deeper into things, like all these things do matter if you're going to try and optimize your physique development in a shorter period of time, which that's what I want to do with myself and clients.
Exactly. I mean, there's going to be some people listening, maybe it's general population clients, as we're calling people really busy with work or whatever. It doesn't mean that just because we talk about what's optimal and me and Neil live a certain way and we aim to do certain things, doesn't mean that you should. I always say sometimes you get martyrs, you get people in life where they know what's optimal, they can't do what's optimal. So instead of trying their best, which might not actually be optimal, they just go, oh, I can't do optimal, so I'm just not going to fucking bother. I'm not going to give it a go at all. Doesn't mean that you have to be fucking having a shake every 3 hours and stimulating it bang on, but at least be aware of it. At least know that if it's a rest day or whatever, you can, maybe increase, whatever it is. The last one I want to finish on, mate, what do you do in a bulk in terms of steps, cardio, fitness? Do you do anything or not? I was just curious to know about that. What would you do?
When putting weight on, bulking.
Yeah. What would you do in a bulk? Do you do any cardio when you're bulking? So
I didn't the first time around, and I definitely felt worse for it, and I definitely looked worse for it. It was during lockdown. It was a proper fat head. Not helped with I'd shaved my head as well. So I introduced cardio this time around, doing 20-30 minutes a week. Some moderate. I've actually started adding in some high intensity stuff. It's just a matter then of trying to match the calories as well, which you'll see by tracking scale weight. But I've certainly found it. I track blood pressure. I track blood glucose in the fasting blood glucose in the morning. I've seen a huge amount of improvement in that from doing that. So just for example, at the top end of my weight last time when I was 210 pounds, my blood pressure was like 140/90, which was really high for me. It was a bit worrying. Yep. This time at the same weight with added cardio, it's 120/70. So it's a big difference. Insulin sensitivity is a lot better. Steps, I don't go out of my way to do steps because just naturally, as you know, if you're on the gym floor, you're hitting 15-20,000 a day anyways.
I was going to say, I know you do a lot of steps anyway, don't you? So maybe consider that people listening might need. Neil, saying 3 20-minute sessions of cardio, but what do you average? Probably between 15 and 20,000 anyway a day.
20,000 every day. So I would rather people do less than that. I do think having cardio in when you're bulking, we're still trying to maintain health markers. Also allows you to perform better in the gym. I found that a lot of my back off sets or higher rep set work has been a lot more efficient, and I've been able to feel muscularly rather than going, I need the gas tank at the end of some of the deadlift sets. Yeah,
one of the things I learned when I was with Eugene Teo and John Meadows years ago, when I met them and I went to seminars working with them for a little bit, was they talk a lot about having cardio still in on a bulk, but what they'll talk about was breathing through your nose. Something I encourage my clients to do to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system between sets, and also so that when you're sleeping at night, if you can try and do your cardio breathing through your nose for your low intensity stuff, it'll help you recover between sets, but also for sleeping at night. And what we're saying is that when people are bulking, your sleep can be affected. When I think about it, I think when I probably was at my heaviest, 100 kilo, I probably wasn't sleeping as good, and you get sort of a little bit of sleep apnea and everything, particularly if you're a smaller lad, and we're talking about a top end of a bulk here. So that's something to consider. Is it's not just about eating the food in the time of you lifting the weight in the gym. It's the recovery between sets. It's your ability to calm down and relax, which is why the breathing and being fit enough, and also then you sleep at night. If you can't do those 3 things, you're not going to go on with what we're going to say.
I've heard that before about the breathing through the nose. It's something to look into. It sounds right. It makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. It's
good. So with the breathing through the nose thing, I give all my clients like a set number of cardio minutes in a bulk and in a cut, both ways. Obviously, more minutes in a cut. But everyone I work with, I encourage the low intensity cardio. So like a light jog, cycling, anything that isn't HIIT, your high intensity stuff. Try to breathe through your nose. It takes a lot of getting used to, and you still might have times where you really have to push. But it does make a big difference. And for me, going off track a little bit, but with your breathing in terms of like meditating, working, calming myself down after the gym, having that relaxing state. And again, why it links in is the ability to digest food will be dictated by the nervous system that the state that you're in at the time. So if you finish training, anyone who's just done a really hard leg session and you're fucked, sympathetic nervous system's firing, which is like your fight or flight, you're like hyped up. The last thing you're going to do at the end of the session, you're not going to eat. You don't eat for a while after, do you? But you want to be able to eat soon enough. So that slowing your breathing down, trying to breathe through your nose. And haven't trained that in your walk and in your cardio, even if you're just out walking doing your steps, trying to be a bit more mindful and breathe through your nose. So then later on in your day, whether it's between sets, whether it's post-training, to recover and get you into this relaxed state quicker. That's why they said to do it. For me, that year and ever since, I've found that as well. That might be purely just the placebo effect in my head. I find I've got leaner with cardio since through doing that and breathing through my nose, because in my physio in Leeds mentioned that to us as well, that he thought that when I started doing that, he noticed the changes a little bit quicker because I was less stressed. And it was almost like it was taking less cardio to get more of a result, because I don't know, I don't even really know how that happened, but
I like the idea of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to try that, just start at a pace that's comfortable, breathe through your nose. And what I do, everyone who's done cardio before does the thing of like, got 20 minutes, so I've got like 4 lots of 5 minutes or whatever it is, and you count it down in your head and you're doing the right, I've got a minute until 10 minutes and I've only got another. So what I would do is when I started doing it to get comfortable is I'd put something on, I'd be on the treadmill or whatever, and just a high incline walk or a light jog, because it is hard. The jogging and breathing through your nose is fucking hard. But what I would do to start with that is count how many times you have to open your mouth. Just a little challenge for yourself. So you do it for 20 minutes on a high incline walk, try through your nose, and as well, it makes you a lot more present because you're really focusing on your breathing. And then at the end, you might be like, right, in 20 minutes, I had to breathe through my mouth 4 or 5 times, and it'll improve with time. And just see if it makes a difference for you. Anyone that's particularly stressed as well, I think it's a good one to try. And it's kind of almost like a little bit of a step towards meditating. Not a lot of people, I love meditating, but not a lot of people get into that. But that's kind of almost like a little bit of a step towards it and being more present and mindful. So yeah, covered some good points there, Neil, on bulk, and I hope you've got some good ones for cutting as well, mate. So the other side of this coin, if you like, cutting. So you have been shredded. You have had proper a skull head. I'll put the photos up. Anyone who's listening to this in the car, I encourage you, follow Neil on Instagram for one thing, but go and look at how lean Neil was. And you always know when someone's really truly lean. It's not about their fucking abs. The glutes is a good indicator, but if you're into bodybuilding and you go to a show, you can just see from the sunken eye sockets and how fucking gaunt someone's face is. Neil had that. So
I was looking.
Yeah. So first, mate, just tell a little bit first about your experience of the differences. What would you say, to open this up, the differences between cutting with your clients and also you yourself cutting, in terms of your commitment to the process and just how you felt while doing it? And then obviously we'll get into our tips, both of our tips for cutting.
With bulking, I feel like that this time around, I very much tried to go right. I'm treating this off season like a prep phase, because it's like I see this like a short period of time where I'm trying to maximize as much as I can. It's basically a 5-year project in my head. But I do feel a lot of clients find it a lot easier when it comes to dieting, because there's a very much an end goal. You know what you're after. You can see it. You have that validation constantly in the mirror. So you can go into it a little bit harder. You know, my experience of dieting, I've dieted before. It's always hard. Getting to that level of leanness was absolutely brutal, to be honest, at times. Like I knew going into that show I couldn't be the biggest or whatever, but I knew that you can get dieting and getting lean is all about your effort, your work, your ability to in some ways suffer. And obviously that's not I wouldn't have general clients doing that, but for competition prep, it was like this is the sport. So, you know, it was definitely very, very hard. Like psychologically, I wasn't worried about feeling smaller. It was just there was a lot of stress I find when you're dieting as well. Of like obviously you're hungry, your sleep becomes affected, your training's not as enjoyable, and it's trying to manage all them variables too to deliver a good outcome. Because ultimately, as you said, even with stress, you end up holding body fat, you're not dropping weight, the scales are fluctuating a lot, and it is a bit more, I find that very mentally challenging too, and it's trying to manage clients through that. With photo shoots, I feel that's a good way to start before you go into a competition prep. Can you actually, like you do the 28-day challenge, it's nearly going, right, see how hard you can work and look what you can get, and then it's that step beyond that.
Yeah, awesome. Would you say, mate, with you, do you do anything, not maybe it's different, but is there anything that you've done in the past that you would hard recommend don't do in a cut? Like, would you say, so for me, an example of that to kick off would be, I found that when I was younger, my first bodybuilding show, I prepped myself and I was lean, but you can never be too lean. However, I lost a lot of size, and it wasn't that I was getting any leaner. I was losing muscle. I was doing it naturally. And because I was doing it myself, and this is the beauty of having a coach, I didn't really have anyone to give us a pat on the back or give us a bit of reassurance as to the direction I was headed in. And I was constantly wanting to do more. I was doing cardio in the morning, at lunch, at night. I was training twice a day. And it was, don't get us wrong, I had a fucking great time. I enjoyed doing it. And it was hard. I was suffering at the end. But my point here is, and what people take from it, is because I was doing it on my own, I had no one really checking in with us. I was just thinking, I thought that working harder would be better, and it isn't. You need to have a plan. It's not just sometimes less is more. So that'll be my first one out. What few mistakes have you made, mate, when it comes to cutting, if you like?
That's a brilliant point. There's two of them there. I think actually having not like promotion or whatever, like a coach is really important, or somebody that knows what they're talking about, has an eye over you, not someone that's just saying, you're lame, you're looking great. You need somebody that's going to literally tell you what to do at a point, because your head starts playing tricks on you. And then what that leads to is doing too much. And I would say that I went, even with coach, a little bit beyond where I should have been in terms of losing muscle mass. I didn't have the muscle mass to be able to afford to lose it, or you look stringy. So I think looking at your training and your programming, actually, everyone says what built it, kept it. Yes and no, because you don't need as much at that back end of the diet. We don't need to be overdoing. We're trying to effectively, when you're that lean, we're just trying to hold on to muscle tissue. You're not building any. So maybe rather than doing 2 sets to death in the hack squat, do 1. Merely trying to manage recovery at that back end is going to bring about a better look.
Right. So talking about the cutting, the tips for cutting. So maybe tapering your training down when you're really at the tail end of a diet was what you're saying.
I think so. I think training volume is something to be looked at on both ends. When you can push hard, when it's a necessity to. When I say push hard, I'm still a fan of taking sets very close to failure. But at the same time, it's how much of that you need to actually do. And I think I started wasting away a little bit and put myself at risk of injury, which it didn't really need to happen.
No, that's really good. And what would you say in terms of the diet in a cut? Like, did you do anything different? Did you have refeeds? Did you have a cheat meal? How did you diet down, mate? What would you do?
Essentially, I prepped for around 20 weeks. And I feel it was, again, we didn't know how long it would take me to get lean. I was very adherent. So I was absolutely ready not to miss a gram. It was my focus was very much there. So I was probably ready 6 weeks with 4 weeks left. So that's when we started introducing refeeds. I probably had more McDonald's Big Macs in the last 4 weeks than I've had in the last 10 years, that whole prep. Because my body was just running through. I was sick of it. The first time it was like, oh, Big Mac, brilliant. And then by the third one of that week, it was like, oh God, Big Mac was thinking. So I didn't refeed throughout the whole thing. Maybe there was one day we had a little bit more carbohydrate. It was only towards the end when we were trying to peak for the shoot and the show that we started throwing in a little bit more. I think that was, metabolism felt very ramped up, or I was burning through a lot. So it was just trying to keep me full as we went down. With clients, I kind of have a longer process as well. So it's like, I don't want to be rushing it. If we're getting a photo shoot or we're getting show ready, I would like to, especially with newer clients that are new to dieting to that level, is having the ability where they can go off plan. Don't tell them to go off plan, but have a little bit of assurance set aside that if we do, something does go wrong, we can fix it and get back on track. Yeah,
I think it as well, no matter how, for most people anyway, when you think you're lean enough, you probably need another 4 weeks, or like you're probably not quite where you are. And that's again the benefit of a coach or having someone watch over you is, these refeeds or carbs or, putting stuff back in. If you're doing it yourself in a cut, sometimes you can be too harsh on yourself, but equally, and you don't have a break, or equally the other side of it can be some lads, if again, and this is what we touched on in the beginning, we're going to finish with it as well, the psychological aspects of it, but knowing what you're likely to think that is happening in terms of, oh, I'm losing muscle. If you're someone who's always wanted to be big and you do a cut and then you feel like you're losing muscle, guess what you're going to be telling yourself when no one's watching you to be like, should I eat a little bit more carbs so I look a little bit fuller, or should I have a cheat meal, or maybe I've earned this week, or maybe I should do that. And again, this is where having a coach or just having someone saying to you like, mate, you've got to get flat to get lean. Like you're going to feel fatigued, you're going to look a little bit smaller, but doesn't mean you've lost muscle. You just going to be depleted in terms of your muscle glycogen stores aren't there, you're fatigued, the whole host of reasons, but you'll get it back and you'll look better in the long run. But having someone there to be like, actually, mate, probably don't need that refeed this weekend, like you're still overweight, or, and with clients as well, for me, normally in the first, don't get us wrong. I'll always, if someone says to us, it's my daughter's birthday, I'm going out with my wife, I've got this, I'll always teach them how to and amend the plans to factor things in. You shouldn't miss life events, but I think a predetermined, I'm having a cheat meal or I'm going to have a break on this week, or doing that sometimes can make people complacent, or can also kind of like slow the process down. So as much as possible, particularly in someone's first 12-week block with me, I try to get them not to have as many cheat meals, because I think naturally in life anyway, stuff will come up, whether it's a party, an event, a night out, a meal. You'll find that life will throw something at you and you'll want to amend then, as opposed to when you don't need it, saying, oh, well, I've dieted for 2 weeks or a week, let's have a cheat meal, or have a high day, or whatever it is. Whereas when we get a little bit further down the line, you maybe more advanced. Me, you, some of my longer term clients, they've earned the right to flexibility. They've proven that they can follow the plan and they're sticking to it for 90% of the time. Those people can probably afford to have more often, more regular off-plan meals, because they're probably a little bit leaner. The body's used to the process more, and me as a coach and you as a coach, Neil, would trust them to fucking do it properly, as opposed to like sometimes with some people, particularly for me online, so it's where we differ probably the one-to-one. I don't know people all over the world working with us. I don't know them as well, particularly in the beginning. So the first 12 weeks, I have to be a bit of a cunt. I have to be like, no, mate, like we need to do this, or we need to do that, because I can't really afford, like, you're paying us a lot of money to get a result, not to be like, yeah, eat what you want on a weekend. So it's kind of meeting in the middle on that. So I think similar thoughts there for both with the diet, I think.
It can also throw up issues surrounding food that I see as red flags with it as well. You know, when people are so attached when they're dieting that, shit, come Saturday, I get my refeed or I get my off-plan meal, and you can nearly become so food focused that the whole week is just striving towards getting to this free meal. And then after dieting, that becomes a terrible rebound. So it's always something I'm looking out for, is that red flag. Because as you know there, as you do, it's not just about getting somebody in shape once and then they never want to do it again. It's like, as you say, it's been able to do this year after year and get better year after year and not have all these issues around food and your body.
What would you say, mate, just to finish off on the tips for cutting? Like I asked you for bulking as well. What did you do in terms of cardio? What were you really heavy on your cardio to get your leanest, or were you using the diet? How did you do it?
Well, this time it was much more like, as I got a coach this time to help get us through it, and it was definitely a massive benefit. But like there was a lot of cardio with the end. I think my step count. Now this was during COVID, so I always find it like when you're naturally doing neat, you're not thinking about it. It just steps come up. Where with COVID, I was in the house more, was trying to build online, so it was 15. We were doing 15,000 steps a day. But the top end, it was an hour of cardio, 6 days a week as well, training 5 days a week. So we really had to we really did grind out to the end to get to that lean. Yeah. And so again, looking back on it from experience, I feel we could have got away with potentially less as well. But it was a bit of an all-in approach. So I do think cardio is a good tool, but it's one of them things I would implement more. Again, like if you've got a pack of cards, you're not going to play them all at once. We play the card when needed. Light calorie drops. So we were introducing a little bit of cardio, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. So it didn't seem as daunting, but by the end it was fairly high. I think it was hours cardio 6 days a week. Calories were around 1,700 at a point, below 100 grams of carbs a day, and 15,000 steps. So it was got a lot.
Yeah, and how did you fluctuate in terms of carb days, no carbs, training days, rest days? What did you fluctuate a little bit, the calories?
So we usually had the split I had was we had a little bit more carbohydrates on lower body days, and then it was, but it was still not high. So it might have been a 200 calorie disparity between rest days, upper body day, lower body day. So we kind of had a little bit more there in terms of how much expenditure was being needed through the session. Yeah,
awesome. Right, the last thing that I want to touch on, the last question, which I think is we've touched, it's been mentioned throughout the episode, I want to kind of get into it properly, is the psychological aspects of both. So again, for both, I touched on me getting up to 100 kilos. Neil's done a very successful bulk in the past, but equally with cutting. How have you managed, mate, to kind of, what techniques do you use to manage that psychological aspect of trying to be better, but not, embracing the fact that you're going to have to go away from the ideal? Because I think that's where a lot of people struggle. They get in shape once and then they want to stay there. But the problem with that is by maintaining, they sometimes lose, and you're not going to have then that year-on-year progression. So how do I accept that, and kind of what have you done?
I think that's it. That is, I would say, the hardest part. Psychology is the hardest part of this whole process. Physically, you can push through things, but if your mind's not in it, it is extremely, extremely hard. Certainly the first time, even this time coming out of it, it was nearly like an element that there is an element of imposter syndrome, because you were the shredded guy, and then what are you now? You're in between. So I think very much like you're into meditation. For me, it was about, I like to write stuff down, give myself a pathway of like, this is where I want to be in 2 years, and these are the steps that you need to take in order to get there. So breaking them, that big long-term goal, that it's a real driver, a real want, a real need for me to step on stage in 2 years, be significantly better, and have that broken down into these little 6-month phases.
Yeah.
But then also, like we talked about near at the start, was attaching yourself to the process. So for me, I've had a big, like, I definitely had body image issues when I was younger. Now I don't. I was posting stuff up all the time on a heavy state, and it's attaching yourself to the process. So like what you're gaining from that at the time. So the traits rather than the actual outcome. So for me, it was like, right, I am disciplined, I am hardworking, and then traits will carry you through bulking and dieting, rather than just going, right, I'm fat or I'm too small. Actually, what do you gain from the day-to-day of this whole process? You're getting stronger, you're becoming more like stronger minded. So that all these little things, they add up.
I think really I think what's good there is maybe I always work in 12-week blocks, but sometimes 12 weeks isn't enough for these processes. So I think what Neil mentioned there is really going back right to maybe say, or going forward, sorry, maybe it's a year, 2 years, like what you did is brilliant. Because having that real sense of purpose in the long-term goal will give you more clarity and purpose and direction in the short term to go through the harder periods. But the other side of that is don't be someone who's saying things like, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy. You need to learn to be present in the process and just enjoy each day, because that's all that we've got. We came down from out yesterday. We're not living in tomorrow. We've only got today. So we need to think, right, what can I do today? What can I control? Control the controllables. I always say is think about, right, today I can train, I can do my diet. How can I enjoy that as much as possible? Because this is all you're going to have is each day. But while still be aware or thinking about the long-term plan. How long, mate, or what would you say in terms of someone's thinking about bulking or cutting or both? What would you say in terms of the length of time? And would you go off how they feel mentally, or would you go off the body?
I think it has to be mentally for most people, unless you are a competitor that's trying to maximize every single aspect of this. I like to see somebody, I think you have to give it 4 months in a surplus anyways. And then that's when I like to do, right, where are we at? Whether do maybe a month cutback, or we start, I wouldn't like to diet. I'd like to always get people doing 4 months, usually in a surplus, 1 month potentially pull back, because then psychologically you feel a bit better, you start looking a bit better, you start seeing, okay, I have a built muscle, go another 4 months, and then potentially that's when we diet, or we go another month and go back into it. So I always like to break it in. I feel, especially with trying to build muscle, it takes time. Fat loss, it can be like that if you can commit to it. You know, we've seen again with yourself some phenomenal results in 28 days. But actually, the process of building something that doesn't exist, that takes much more time. It's really buying into that process. Like that, and as you say as well, it's attaching yourself to the things you can do and the positives of each. So it's trying not to dwell psychologically on shit, I'm fat. It's like, no, I'm strong. You know, so again, it's attaching yourself for me to these traits of like going into the gym to enjoy it, rather than going in and going, oh, I'm fucking dying here, but I look good. Do you know what I mean? So it's always attaching yourself to the positives, the pros of that process, rather than thinking of the negatives or where you want to be. As you say, live in the moment and enjoy it. Yeah. Think of that greater goal.
That's a really, really good point, mate, in terms of reframing it. So when we're saying maybe is that you're fat or fluffy, thinking, well, actually, I'm strong. Like, look at your logbook. Think, well, actually, I've hit more PBs. I've done this. I've done that. As opposed to thinking about the negatives. So that's really, really good advice. What would to kind of finish this bit off, your overall, what specific techniques would you check in every so often in terms of with yourself? How would you know you're on the right track, as well as these, you know, like I say, the logbook and the day-to-day stuff? What would you do maybe mentally, physically? Is it photos? Is it weight? Like, what would be and this is in both directions, to kind of support the psychological side of it?
Yeah. So like I'm big into data tracking. So like I have a sheet and I'm looking at, usually with bulking, I'll still do photos once a week in the same light and pose as well. Sometimes if I'm trying to make myself feel good, I'll do it after I've had a gym. If I'm literally feeling down or a little bit, I'm getting fat, I find the best light at the gym, do an upper body session, then take the photos, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's just a bit of affirmation there, but it's the check-in photos. I'll do scale weight readings. I'll mark down my digestion, my sleep, my stress, how I'm feeling. And again, the most successful clients I've had can buy into all of that as well. So they'll have a check-in sheet, and that's when they get a good result, when they're much more in top and understanding of every single element of this process.
Yeah, because the data, those little data points that we take along the way, we're not getting married to any one of them in particular, but what they do is when we're maybe not looking our best or feeling our best, that data will support that we're headed in the right direction, because we can't always just go off visually or how we look, and also mentally how we feel, because like we said before, motivation will come and go. It's fleeting, it's an emotion. It's not going to be there all the time. So when we're not motivated, yes, we need to have built the discipline and the routine, but it helps to have the data and the numbers from previous books or from the last week to know, like, right, I don't feel great today, but I know that I'm headed in the right direction, because as well as my logbook, this number in terms of maybe scale weight or these photos or my measurement of my arms or whatever it is. Too often people don't want to do the measurements or the check-ins or the data check-in when they're not in a good place. You need to do it good or bad weekly all the time, so that you've got this wealth of information to support you either way. It's not something that you can just be like, oh, I feel good, or I know it's going to be a good check-in. I say to people all the time in my groups when I work in my group coaching program in a circle, don't just check in when it's fucking good. You need to check. It's easy when it's good. Like when you're headed in the right direction, when you're weight loss, fat loss, everyone loves checking in every week. Oh, I've lost a kilo, I've lost a lot. You need to check in when it's bad. The check-in is just a reflection of where you're at time, but it's the check-ins and the amendments that give you the opportunity to amend. It's not, no one writes a diet first time and sticks with it for 12 weeks and makes no changes. So if you don't check in, or you're not using this information, this way of gathering data, you're fucked essentially. Like you really, really need to be doing it. I can't stress it enough. I'm sure you're the same with your clients.
It's like the calorie tracking thing, it's like I get to send me screenshots over and they're like, oh, bang on macros, bang on calories, and then you don't hear them in 2 days. You're like, aye, sun's up there. They've been out, they haven't tracked it. Well, I didn't track because they had some shit. You're like, this is what we need to do. We need to get on top of this sort of.
Even when it's bad, even when it's not going great, track it, because it just gives you that information as to both how you respond to maybe time off the diet. The more you put into the process with a coach and with yourself, and the more you're willing to do that and commit to it and be willing to have bad days, the easier it is to have more good days, because you know what bad is. You just bury your head in the sand, you don't get any help, you don't stick to the diet, you don't follow the training program, and then you try to come back to it. It's just so much harder. So good or bad, please, people, just do your fucking check-in and take the data that we need you to take.
You can reverse engineer then as to why it didn't go right. Where did it go wrong? If you're not being accountable to yourself or being introspective enough to go, shit, hold my hands up, maybe this isn't why, then how can you ever get better? Yeah.
And that's what we do as coaches as well. Like, obviously, yes, we're guiding people who are going for this year-on-year progression of bulking and cutting and bulking and cutting and trying to beat your previous best. But also, it's easy for us in terms of our jobs. If everything's going well, we're probably not going to make a lot of changes to your diet. We're probably going to keep it the same until you plateau. I always say to people, like, someone will have a really good check-in and they'll be like, right, are we going to drop the calories a little bit more? And I'm like, no, like we're not. Like you mentioned before, we're not going to use we're turning the game of cards. We're not going to put that card down before we need to. But if you then, based on what I've just said there, if you then don't check in when your weight plateaus, or maybe gain a little bit of weight back, actually as a coach, we might have been looking for that to happen. So it's not necessarily even a bad check-in. It's just that we were waiting for it to occur. And it's actually part of the process, is this leveling out in the not so sexy or not so like to shout about check-ins. Is really, really part of it. Right. To finish off, mate, let's go to the legendary quickfire question round. So got 8 questions. 4 of them are specifically for you, and then 4 or more you can have a think. You get a little bit longer. So are you ready?
Bit worried.
Right, the first one: Guinness or lager?
Guinness.
That's a great question. Upper or lower body when training? What do you prefer? Lower. Yeah.
Lower. You stuck right in with that, can't you? That feels like real training.
Aye. Squats or deadlifts?
Deadlift every day.
Oh, I think I'm torn. Bulk or cut?
bulk positive affirmation.
Yeah. You've touched further. I prefer cutting for that one for sure. Right, these are the 4 harder ones. So, don't hold back here, Neil. Just say whatever you want to say. Don't worry about, do I know anyone here or there or whatever. So, what is the worst place you have ever visited?
Birmingham. I've been a handful of times, and it's like a one-way system. I nearly broke my relationship up at the Arnold's. Actually, we were driving because we couldn't get in the place. It's hands down the worst place I've been.
Brilliant. The best place you've ever visited?
Ibiza. Been loads of times. Actually, getting married there next year as well. Like, it can be anything you want it to be. Ibiza.
Class.
I think
Aye, like a good party. Right. What is the worst piece of advice you have ever been given?
That sounds dodgy, but I think, like, I remember my mum used to say to me a lot, it's the taking part that counts. Mm-hmm. And while it's a nice idea, I feel it like it really bred mediocrity, bred average. It's like, it's not just about being present. It's about like going there and giving it your best. That's how you're going to progress. So I always hated that. As the older I got, the more I hated it. It's just the taking part. It's not, life's not about just taking part.
No, you've got to go for it. I agree.
Taking over, as McGregor said.
Yeah. Right. And then the last one, the other side of that. What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
Find your passion and then find a way to make money out of it. I think it's, for me, that was something that I kind of really built in the last few years. I think a lot of people think, right, how can they make money? And they maybe go down a route that makes them money. But I feel if you're passionate about something, you wake up every day and you've got a fire in your stomach about wanting to achieve it, you become very good at it, and ultimately you make money that way and you enjoy life along the way. So for me, I definitely find your passion and then find a way of making money from it.
Awesome. Brilliant, mate. I've absolutely loved that. That was really good. I'm sure everyone will get a lot from it.
That was good. Enjoyed it. Hopefully they understood it.
Yeah, please tell everyone where they can find you on social media and all your handles and stuff. Just give a little quick run through.
Instagram's probably the best place to find us. So it's Neil Rennie Coaching. I work out at the fitness fraternity in Newcastle, so you can always have a look there as well. I'll get Ross to maybe stick the links on, but 100%. Just between the Instagram and the fitness fraternity page, that'd be the best places to find us.
Perfect. Awesome. Make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, follow me and Neil, all the usual stuff. Thanks very much, bro.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
You've been listening to Aesthetically Trained, the podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and spread the word.